the public relations firm of Shirley and Banister. And ResistNet.com is a hub for online organizing for anti-health reform protests. You can find there, among other things, a video entitled Obama Equals Hitler.
A Nazi rally.
April 1945. As Allied forces liberate Nazi concentration camps, the world gets its first glimpse of the horrors wrought by Adolf Hitler's regime. At Nuremberg, the Allies prosecute leading Nazi officials for these crimes against humanity. Some of the most dangerous war criminals are brought to justice, but not all.
There's a myth about Nazis, and that is that there's these horrible people that committed these terrible crimes, and then after 1945 simply disappeared. Well, that simply isn't true.
The truth is that thousands of former Nazis, some of whom committed atrocities, went to work for the United States government without the public's knowledge. During the war, their crimes ranged from overseeing slave labor camps to sending orphans to their deaths. After the war, they were on the U.S. payroll, either as scientists in America or as intelligence agents.
The U.S. government was willing to use mass murderers, was willing to protect them from justice, was willing to hide their activities from the American people.
It was U.S. policy to hire whomever could provide useful information, regardless of whether they were a war criminal or not.
How far did the U.S. government go to cover up the wartime records of these recruits?
It was a scandal. It was one of the great scandals of modern American intelligence history.
When the war ends, Barbie reinvents himself as an expert on Soviet intelligence. After a brief stint in the Gehlen organization, he is recruited by the U.S. Army's Counterintelligence Division, known as the CIC. The Butcher of Lyon works in relative obscurity until the late 1940s, when French authorities call for his extradition from Germany.
When this became enough of a political crisis or political issue in France, American CIC decided to smuggle Barbie out of Europe to get rid of him, to hide him.
With the aid of American officials, Barbie is smuggled to Bolivia, where he lives comfortably for the next 30 years. These former Nazis would seem to be valuable intelligence assets in the Cold War. But documents declassified by the U.S. in the late 1990s cast doubt on the accuracy of the information reported by Gehlen and his spy network.
They had to exaggerate the onerous nature of Stalin's regime in Russia. I mean, why not you just say the facts? Bad enough. But so what they did, they pumped up reports claiming that Stalin was mobilizing forces, Soviet military forces in eastern Germany, that they were going to lurch across the boundary and attack Western Europe at any time.
Why? Because if the Soviets weren't about to attack, then what do you need Gehlen for?
How much the principals need to deny Tom Ridge's revelation that he was pressured to raise the terror threat level just days before President Bush was reelected in November 2004. How much they still need to push back against our reporting of the last 4 years about the nexus of politics and terror, underscored by this. In our third story in the countdown, Donald Rumsfeld today defended himself by turning to Osama bin Laden. In his new book, the former Homeland Security Secretary, Mr. Ridge, writing, Attorney General John Ashcroft strongly urged an increase in the threat level and was supported by Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. There was absolutely no support for that position within our department, none. I wondered, is this about security or politics?
Now you look at the Republican National Convention this week, and you bring in Arnold Schwarzenegger to speak last night. Schwarzenegger is the son of a Nazi. He has praised Nazis. He has praised Hitler. He talked last night in terms like, we will not falter, we will not waver, we will win this war on terror.
He is a leader who doesn't flinch, who doesn't waver, and does not back down.
Well, that's exactly the speeches that Hitler made after the Reichstag fire. Terrorism and the homeland being under attack are precisely the issues that Hitler used to subvert everything within the German system of government. This is a criminal regime. They not only emulate Hitler, but its genesis comes from Hitler. And I defy anyone, a historian, journalist, author, anyone, to come forward and disprove my premise that you cannot differentiate Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939 and the Reichstag fire and his attempt to dominate the world from George W. Bush's unprovoked invasion of Iraq and subversion of the Constitution through the Patriot Act after 9/11, which I submit is his Reichstag fire. Karl Rove and his minions are every bit the masters of propaganda that Joseph Goebbels was. They literally took lessons from Goebbels and Göring about how to create such brilliant propaganda. There's just an endless broken record that is leading up to the present era, that the Bush family has had a single goal for 100 years, which is to become the most powerful family on the planet and to rule the world. That every citizen of this country rise up and do something, because the day of reckoning is at hand, and these people are Nazis. They are practicing Nazi philosophy. They are mimicking Nazi tactics.
Battle, you kept your wits about you. Don't relax that caution now. The Nazi party may be gone, but Nazi thinking, Nazi training, and Nazi trickery remain. The German lust for conquest is not dead. It's merely gone undercover. Somewhere in this Germany are the SS guards, the Schutzstaffel, the Gestapo gangsters. Out of uniform. You won't know them, but they'll know you. Somewhere in this Germany are stormtroopers by the thousands. Out of sight, part of the mob, but still watching you and hating you. Somewhere in this Germany, there are 2 million ex-Nazi officials. Out of power, but still in there. And thinking about next time. Guard particularly against this group. These are the most dangerous. German youth. Children, when the Nazi party came into power, they know no other system than the one that poisoned their minds. They're soaked in it. Trained to win by cheating. Trained to pick on the weak. They've heard no free speech. Read no free press. They were brought up on straight propaganda, products of the worst educational crime in the entire history of the world. Practically everything you believe in, they have been trained to hate and destroy. They believe they were born to be masters, that we are inferiors, designed to be their slaves. They may deny it now, but they believe it, and will try to prove it again. Don't argue with them. Don't try to change their point of view. Other Allied representatives will concern themselves with that. You are not being sent into Germany as educators. You are soldiers on guard. You will not argue with them. You will not be friendly. You will be aloof, watchful, and suspicious. However friendly, however sorry, however sick of the Nazi party they may seem, they cannot come back into the civilized fold just by sticking out their hand and saying, "I'm sorry." Don't clasp that hand. It's not the kind of a hand you can clasp in friendship. Just one mistake may cost you your life. Trust none of them. Someday the German people might be cured of their disease, the world conquest disease. But they must prove that they have been cured, beyond the shadow of a doubt, before they ever again are allowed to take their place among respectable nations. Until that day, we stand guard. We are determined that their plan for world conquest shall stop here and now. We are determined that they shall never again use peaceful industries for warlike purposes. Shall once and for all time come to an end. That is your job in Germany.